Y'all don't need me. I'ma go do what God called me to do.
So you leaving the group right now on the radio? Oh, hell no, man.
Dru Hill, Baltimore, Maryland, active since 1992. In the mid to late 90s, Dru Hill weren't just another R&B group trying to make it. They were a movement. Born out of Baltimore, Maryland, a place better known for its grit than soul, the group gave the streets smooth harmonies, raw emotions, and a frontman in Sisqó whose vocal range was only rivaled by his stage presence. Their first 3 albums, all platinum, weren't just successful, they were defining works in an era where male vocal groups ruled the charts. Hits like In My Bed, Tell Me, How Deep Is Your Love, and These Are the Times made them staples, while their emotional delivery and gospel-rooted soul set them apart from the more polished 112 or Atlanta-based swagger of Jagged Edge. Simply put, Dru Hill had it. A perfect blend of vocal talent, street edge, and a commercial appeal that made them impossible to ignore. But with all that talent came tension. Success rarely heals internal dysfunction, it only exposes it. As their stock rose, cracks began to form between individual ambition and collective unity. Woody's abrupt exit during the peak of their fame to pursue gospel music, Sisqó's solo career, which became an unstoppable force after Thong Song, creating an imbalance no group could comfortably recover from. As egos swelled and priorities shifted, the unity that once felt so natural turned fragile. The original group that walked into the industry wasn't the one walking out of it by the early 2000s. And though they'd reunite multiple times in the years that followed, with different lineups and fleeting buzz, the magic was gone. Dru Hill didn't fail in the traditional sense, they achieved more than most. But in the golden era of hip-hop and R&B crossovers, they were poised to dominate longer than they did. Instead, they became another example of how the pressure of fame, conflicting egos, and mismanaged transitions can cut short what should have been a dynasty. Unlike groups who faded naturally, Dru Hill's exit felt abrupt, like a storm that passed too soon, leaving only echoes behind. Had they stayed the course, they could have been the definitive male group of their generation. This is the story of Dru Hill, a group whose highs were undeniable but whose fall was just as real. They gave us culture, but they also gave more than they should have. What happened? Let's talk about it. Salute to Quentin Bills on IG for this request. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Dru Hill was formed in the early 90s in Baltimore, Maryland, originally as a local singing group performing at talent shows and churches. The core lineup featured lead singer Sisqó, Mark Andrews, Nokio, Tamar Ruffin, Jazz, Larry Anthony, and Woody James Green. Their name paid homage to their neighborhood park, Druid Hill. After catching the attention of Island Records, they released their self-titled debut album in 1996. Fueled by the success of singles like Tell Me and In My Bed, the album went platinum, setting them on the fast rise to stardom. Their second album, Enter the Dru, released in 1998, doubled down on their blend of hip-hop inspired R&B and vocal harmony, pushing them further into the spotlight. But even as the hits stacked up, internal pressures mounted. By the time they returned with Dru World Order in 2002, the group had already fractured, and their golden era was nearing its end. Stunt number 1, internal chaos tore the group apart too soon. At the heart of Dru Hill's short-lived dominance was a constant undercurrent of instability. Even during their peak, the group was navigating emotional turmoil behind the scenes that slowly fractured their chemistry. The first major break came in 1999, right after the massive success of their second album, Enter the Dru. Group member Woody shocked fans by walking out literally on the set of a live MTV performance, citing a spiritual calling to pursue gospel music. It wasn't a clean break. The move blindsided the group and threw a wrench in their trajectory at a time when they were poised to solidify their status among R&B's elite. Dru Hill didn't operate with a shared vision. Each member had different goals, and without tight leadership or cohesion, their differences were amplified. Personalities clashed, and management didn't help, often favoring Sisqó, whose star power was growing too large to contain. In group settings, that kind of imbalance rarely goes unnoticed or unchallenged. The group tried to adjust by bringing in new member Sisqó for their 2002 album Dru World Order, but it was clear the group's internal foundation had already crumbled. The energy, unity, and hunger that defined their first two albums was gone. Promotion was scattered, chemistry was off, and though the album had moments, it didn't land the way their previous work did. What's most frustrating is that this kind of breakdown was avoidable. Groups lose members all the time, but the truly great ones have leadership and structure strong enough to keep the machine moving. Dru Hill didn't. Once Woody left and tensions mounted, the group never fully recovered. They may have reunited, added new voices, and released music later, but the soul of Dru Hill as fans knew it had already began slipping away. Stunt number 2, Sisqó's solo success shifted the spotlight too far. When Sisqó released his solo debut Unleash the Dragon in late 1999, it didn't just elevate his personal fame, it upended the dynamic of Dru Hill entirely. The album was a smash, going multi-platinum and producing one of the most iconic R&B crossover hits of the era with Thong Song. His follow-up single, Incomplete, proved he wasn't just a flashy performer, he had real star power on his own. In the eyes of the industry and the fans, Sisqó was no longer just the face of Dru Hill, he was Dru Hill. This was a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it raised the group's overall profile and proved they had a legitimate superstar in their ranks. On the other hand, it elevated the imbalance that the rest of the group could never reconcile. Sisqó's rising solo fame took time, focus, and creative energy away from Dru Hill, just as they needed to regroup after Woody's departure. His solo career demanded full attention, leaving the group on hold while he toured, recorded, and basked in the glow of solo stardom. Behind the scenes, resentment reportedly grew. Nokio, Jazz, and later Sisqó were essentially left waiting, unsure when or if the group would truly come back together in a meaningful way. Sisqó had every reason to chase solo success, he earned it, but the way it played out caused lasting damage. When Dru Hill finally returned in 2002, the momentum was gone, and so was the group's chemistry. Fans noticed, critics noticed, and the numbers reflected it. Dru World Order barely made a dent commercially compared to their earlier work. Sisqó's breakout moment was historic, but it came at the cost of the group that made it possible. By stepping into the spotlight alone, he unintentionally cast a shadow that Dru Hill would never fully emerge from again. Stunt number 3, a cycle of attempts. After their early 2000s decline, Dru Hill spent the next 2 decades caught in a cycle of reunion attempts, a lineup reshuffles, and promises of a return to form that never quite landed. Their story became less about music and more about the drama surrounding who was in the group this time around. Sisqó replaced Woody for Dru World Order. Tao came in when the group reformed in the late 2000s. Then in 2018, Nokio and Jazz stepped aside, and Sisqó added 2 remaining members of the R&B group Playa, forming a new iteration altogether. While these changes kept the Dru Hill brand technically alive, they also fractured what it stood for. Each new version brought confusion. Fans who grew up on the original 4 didn't know what to make of the revolving door of members. The core dynamic that gave the group its identity was missing, and without it, the emotional connection faded. Even when the group dropped new singles or teased full albums, the excitement rarely followed. It didn't help that their releases were sporadic, underpromoted, or simply got lost in the shuffle of an R&B landscape that had dramatically evolved since the 90s. Their live performances, while often strong vocally, sometimes fueled more curiosity for the drama than the music. Public interviews, canceled tours, and social media callouts only added to the sense that Dru Hill were fighting harder to stay relevant than to evolve artistically. What made it frustrating wasn't just the instability, it was knowing how much more they could have given had they maintained their foundation. In the end, Dru Hill became a group with multiple legacies. One is etched in the platinum plaques and unforgettable ballads. The other is a tangled history of what-ifs, could-have-beens, and nearly made-its. For a group once poised to sit atop male R&B, they spent far too long just trying to figure out who they were. All in all, Dru Hill was never short on talent, impact, or success. They gave the culture timeless records, unforgettable vocals, and a frontman in Sisqó who became the defining face of late 90s R&B. But while their legacy remains respected, it's hard not to imagine how much higher they could have soared with just a little more stability. Internal conflict, shifting lineups, and individual ambitions turned a once unified group into a revolving cast of fleeting momentum. In a time when R&B was booming and room existed for multiple kings, Dru Hill had the throne within reach, but never held it long enough to define the era. Their name still rings, but the story behind it is a reminder that greatness takes more than just talent. It takes consistency through the good and the bad. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, their growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.